Hello, Facebook. You are joining Representative Rod Blum and Representative Desantis today to talk about draining the swamp. We'll be asking them a few questions. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. First, if we could have you guys each just introduce yourselves and describe which area you represent.
I'm Ron DeSantis. I represent the 6th Congressional District in Florida, which is on the East Coast and includes cities like Daytona Beach.
And I'm Congressman Rod Blum, and I represent the 1st District of Iowa, and it's the northeast quadrant of Iowa, 20 counties, 16 of which are rural, and arguably a little bit chillier than Florida. Ron?
Although we had some snow flurries in northern Florida. Central Florida was in the 30s. I think you had to go all the way down to Naples before you could get to 50, which for us is unseasonably cold.
I just do have to throw in here, when you're in the 30s, you're 40 degrees warmer than my district has been, so I don't feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
Okay, and first, if we could have Congressman Blum, if you could discuss the bills that you've introduced for our Drain the Swamp package. I think there's 4 of them.
Yes, and I'm also co-sponsor, I think original co-sponsor on 3 of Representative DeSantis' bills that he'll talk about. Our 4 bills are, first of all, is a ban on first-class air travel, paid for by the taxpayers. I've got nothing against flying in the cushy leather seats and drinking wine out of glassware in first class, just that the taxpayers shouldn't be paying for it. So congressional members are flying first class, pay for that upgrade yourself. Second, I'd like to add a bill that would ban luxury car leases. Most voters probably do not know this, but congressional members can lease vehicles back in their district for up to $1,000 a month lease payment. That's a pretty nice car. Most of the people in my district don't have house payments of $1,000 a month, much less a car payment. So if you want to do it on your own, great. Out of the campaign, great. Taxpayers should not be paying for that. Third bill has to do with lobbying. Currently, there's a 2-year wait to lobby. So if you retire or get beat from lose and leave Congress, you have to wait 2 years before you can go over on K Street, where the lobbyists live, and make a 6-figure income. My bill would ban that. Lifetime ban, permanent ban on that. I think we're public servants, and I don't think we should be monetizing or cashing in on the trust of your vote. And then lastly, eliminating the congressional pension program. We have a very good pension program here. I think you would agree with that, Ron, as well. And I would like to see us eliminate that pension program. Okay, well that's Ron. Go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah. Well, so,
I need to lead into that.
Yeah, the pensions for Congress, it's the type of thing where members of Congress, a lot of them go to K Street, they make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. There's no need to be doing pensions. I think it creates bad incentives for elected officials. So my bill, the EPIC Act, ending pensions in Congress, would do that. Now, I declined the pension when I came in. Other members, will step up and lead by example, but that doesn't alter the incentives. If it's just a lead by example, you've got to have that be the rule of the day. The other bills, 2 bills that I have that I think are really good. One is probably the most important reform we could do, or one of the 2 most important reforms would be imposing term limits on members of Congress. You see some of these members that get entrenched after 50 years, like a John Conyers, and how he treats people. They develop a sense of entitlement. They have their own fiefdom. I think if you did 3 terms in the House, 2 terms in the Senate, people that got elected here, instead of worrying about being here for life, they would say, you know what, we have limited time, let's get some stuff done, and I think the incentives would be so much better. The other thing I would also say 1B would be a balanced budget amendment, because I don't see us getting our fiscal house in order unless you actually have those constraints. The other Drain the Swamp bill that I have is the Hush Fund Elimination Act for the sexual harassment payments that were being made on behalf of members of Congress for misconduct that they had committed. And these were secret payments that were not disclosed to the taxpayer. So my bill does 2 things. It eliminates the hush fund going forward so that members are responsible for harassment if they perpetrate it. But then it also opens the books on the past payments. Victims can remain anonymous, although victims can speak out if they want to, but the member's office and the amount and the nature of the offense should be made public, and people should be accountable to their constituents. We are going to vote on some version of that I think this month, the
Great.
pushback we're getting is some in the leadership and some of the other folks in the Congress don't want to open the books on the past payments. But how could you possibly be spending tax dollars in secret without letting the taxpayer know? The taxpayer has a right to know where these funds are going.
Couldn't agree more, and good news that we may be voting on at least a version of that this month. The last one that I forgot to mention was cutting congressional members' pay by 5% every year that the budget's not balanced. And I often ask folks in eastern Iowa, Ron, I ask them, how long do you think it would take to balance the budget if our pay was going to be cut? And I'll bet it'd be done on a weekend retreat. I bet we get this budget balanced. So the bill would cut congressional pay by 5% every year that the budget's not balanced. And once it is balanced, then our pay is restored to its normal level. The incentives in this town, I've talked a lot, Ron, about incentives, are upside down. I came from the private sector, and I came here, and I just am aghast at there's no incentive to save money. There's only incentives to spend money. That's why I agree with you. We need a balanced budget amendment. I'm convinced we're not going to get our fiscal house in order. And there's an incentive to be a career politician, and an incentive to stay here. And we just need to change the incentives. I often had an idea, Ron, I'd like to get your opinion on this. If we gave federal employees a percentage of the money that their idea saved, if they, for example, if somebody has an idea that saves the taxpayers $10 million a year, is that worth a $1,000 bonus?
Sure.
That's the way they do it in the private sector.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, I'm a military guy, and so at the end of the fiscal year, and it didn't matter which unit I was or where, whatever money is left over, they say, all right, we got to spend it. Let's start buying this. Let's start buying this. We got to get rid of the money. Because if you don't spend all the money in your budget, if you're actually prudent with it, you get penalized, because then the appropriators will say, well, you didn't use all that money, so we're going to give you less. I think it should be that if you're making good decisions and you're exercising prudence with the tax dollar, you should be rewarded for that. And the agencies that are profligate, they should be penalized for that.
Goes back to the incentives. Of all these bills, I think that the two biggest deals here are balanced budget amendment, because I agree, unless we're forced to, I don't think we can get our fiscal house in order, because it's so easy to say yes to more spending, and it's very difficult, as you would agree, to say no. But the term limits, and when I talk about term limits in my district, and you can speak about your own district, it's 80%, 90% of the voters want term limits. So we've got something that 80 to 90% of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, Ron, agree on. But I say, please give us a vote on the House floor. Just give us the vote, and let your member go on record supporting or voting against term limits. Because I think what may happen is when they go back to their district, they say, I'm for a balanced budget, I'm for term limits. And then when they're playing across the Potomac River and they get to Washington, the tune changes a little bit.
Yeah, look, I think that you have huge support in the country for term limits, because the American people are smart. They realize we need term limits. The political class up here in Washington does not want to talk about term limits. But I think the issue has been, because term limits is not actually visible and getting votes, all that public support that's out there is effectively dormant. If we could bring it on the House floor and actually have a national debate about it, I think that would energize people from all different parties and different backgrounds. And I think you'd start to see way more pressure to do term limits. The way you stop term limits, they've done it in Washington, is actually not even to defeat it in a vote. It's just to bottle it up in a committee and never let it get a vote. But if you look at public support for term limits, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, male, female, Republican, Democrat, Independent. Every group in the country supports term limits in varying degrees. And so we need some things to come together on. To me, that would be number one on my list.
So, how does any of this get done? I've been talking about this for the last few days on national television. And to a person, the person interviewing me says, what are the odds? And they're kind of giggling. What are the odds of any of these being voted on? And I always come back with, well, it's kind of like asking turkeys to vote for Thanksgiving. Probably not that good, but I believe in the grassroots. And if the people watching out there and their friends and their family would text, would email our House leadership, Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, their representatives, and say, we would like to see a vote on term limits or balanced budget amendment, this is the way it's going to happen. Because I agree with Ron, these things get bottled up in committee, in the establishment here and the powers to be say they just bury it. And it's going to take a grassroots uprising to make any of these bills we talked about happen. If we could just pass one of them, just vote on one of them, I think we would hear the applause here in Washington from all across the country. People would say, finally, finally they're listening. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, look, when you actually have to go on record and actually have to go out and there's the choice, do you want term limits or not? And there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. That's very clarifying, and I think that would lead some people who probably don't want term limits to vote for it, but those who don't vote for it, I think at least their constituents know where they stand, and then they can take action accordingly.
Couldn't agree more.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. That was a perfect note to end on, and join us next time.
All right.